gonna get started. I'm working on this proto here, and what I'm changing is the proto. Hold on, let me set it up so I can hear myself. The proto is a Lego brick type, and I want to pull the tile part out. Basically, the only the tile is using all of this stuff. This feels like clearly as just a separate type that is living inside of this type right now. Um, I'm not really sure what to call the separate thing, but I guess I'll call it a proto tile for now. So that gets all of these things. And now I guess I'll do that. So there'll still be a new pointer in there that is only used by the tile kind, but that's fine for now. It can definitely be better, but it does raise some confusing issues, though. For one thing, the brain. So the reason the brain is here is and not with a tile is because right now I'm only attaching brains to tiles, but I will want to attach them to characters and parties as well. At the level of protos, I want to be able to make a proto that is like this character, which includes a list of tiles and a particular brain for that character. And then at the same time, I want to be able to create tiles and say, hey, the default way to use this tile is this. So some tiles just come with a tile brain attached, which describes the default way of using the tile. And that was gonna live in the same spot, right? It's like I've got protos for tiles, I've got protos for characters, I've got protos for parties. They're all represented as elements of this proto system, so and they all have brains, so I put the brain here. I guess it's not weird. I guess it's not weird. Okay. So, now my question is, can I make that work somehow? And how do I want to make it work? Well, I have a couple of options. One way I could make this work is I could say when I'm setting up the context, so I'm initializing everything, I'm going to create an array of these proto tiles to parallel the protos themselves and have those point into there, right? This was probably eliminatable because we could just index this based on the same offsets. They're parallel arrays, right? So they don't really need to have this. I'm gonna just let's not bother setting it at all. The question is, do I want to do this at runtime for some reason, or could I do this statically the same way I am with the proto arrays by using the array gather thing? Because we could totally just set up the tiles and then also set up the proto tiles. I wish I had a... Part of me keeps feeling tempted to say, what if I just went kind of like full on here with the dynamic, like the overrided class kind of vibe. So we would have a sum type that is not even put into a union, it's packed separately. Then this would be the proto for characters, party, routes. These are just I don't know what we might call them, like sets or something. And this is a proto tile up here. And then the idea of a proto is just this, right? Because I could then just do a different array type for each one, and the pointers still work for proto subs either way. The only thing that I don't like is I never end up being happy that I made a decision like this. Ever. I've never been happy to make that decision. So I'm pretty hesitant to do it, but it keeps occurring to me right now. But partly that's just because I don't know what to name this thing. This is, I mean, if I just embrace this being a really long name. So those are the protos, and these are the tile protos. There are some reasons why this sucks. In order to get to one of these from one of these, you're going to have to do the division to turn it into an index, and then the multiplication to put it back in. It's a little bit annoying. The main reason I want this Lego brick in this case, though, is because I want to be able to use the proto pointer as a handle. Right? I mean, that's the whole reason why I didn't want to have... That's the reason why I didn't want to have totally separate types for these two. I wanted to still have tiles represented with the same proto as everything else. Maybe what I should do here is just go for the old school compromise at this level. And that's not add a new one of these. Go back to just calling this RPG tiles. Forget that, just keep that. Right, and then we do this. Name. Brain is shared. Hook. Yeah. Okay. I think that's the best compromise. Looking at it, I don't like the idea of doing the parallel arrays because I don't want to have to figure out the best way to deal with mapping from one of the pointers in one of the arrays to pointers in the other. Starting to get annoying. So that's how I'll solve that piece. I know there are some nasty things floating around, so I think I'm going to shift gears here to just picking up Jetsam and Flotsam. I've got tonight and tomorrow to do work on the RPG simulator, and I think I'm going to just work on the mundane things that are just a little bit out of hand, like this thing here. So what this is, totally shifting gears here. This is the variables that sort of create the context for the scripting system. So if you look here, it says get a handle on the system, and then if I track down spots where these are getting touched, they look like this. So this one's pretty tame. Here's the really, really nasty one. So what's happening here is we're trying to call a tile hook, and we're setting the character and tile register, and you can see like it's just this big. I kind of did it as fast as possible. So there's this list of entity pointers that we can index by the entity kind, but for some reason I was really against the idea of having all of the entity kinds here. So you have to do all this, like, first. This is no good. Let's simplify. Let's simplify here. Right now, sim entity kind is still the one that we're looking at. Do we definitely want to use that? I'm not sure, but I'm going to keep it for now. And when you go to index something, you just use the sim kind, entity kind. Let's just start by making that change. That's gonna, even if that doesn't last forever, optimizing this before we even know how to make it less horrible anyways doesn't make any sense. It's way too horrible to program with this system. Okay. Right, okay, so here, don't worry about that. Just use the kind directly. And again, just use this kind directly. Okay, here it actually is a case of using a kind dynamically, right? We're not just hard coding this, so this isn't an overcomplicated way of writing a field for each slot that we want. This is actually being used for dynamic indexing of the set of registers or whatever. Now, there we go. Okay, this one doesn't count because it's just a wrapper. We got to track down the actual places where we call that, but I still have a to-do list here to look at. Okay, never mind. We've already done those. So we can go to this. So that's hard code, hard code, hard code, hard code, hard code, hard code, and hard code. Okay, so that doesn't actually contribute any new instances. Okay. So in theory, that this thing could be useful in case you ever wanted to do this variably from a script. I'm not sure you would actually want that, but it doesn't matter too much. The answer is the only place where we know of that we're doing it dynamically is right here. And what does this do? It sets the entity kind, then runs the brain script, and then it unsets it. So a lot of these things that do this, set it and unset it as if there wasn't some larger containing context. But then I'm going to tell you that that is almost certainly wrong. Like, if we come here and look, what's going to happen is when we run a character brain, it's going to set the character brain, the entity for the character here, and then null it here, right? Well, I'm pretty sure there are going to be times where the containing context also selected that entity for a purpose. Okay, so it's almost like, I mean, this is all basically a parameter passing system. And I could just see saying, you know what, throw my hands up in the air. This is just a stack, and I just need to be able to do save the registers, and then RPG reg this context entity kind, set it to this entity, right? Or if I want it to be even simpler, maybe I just have permission to write to them. We'll rename them like this. This will be reg this, or even better yet, there'll just be, of course, then the name this is going to become illegal. So you'll save your registers. You'll modify them. And then you'll restore them. Now, one way I could do this would be to say that oh, hey, Darius Python. I've been up for about 30 minutes, so didn't miss much yet. I kind of just wrapped up. I wrapped up the last of what I was thinking about, and I'm just chasing down random RPG simulator API architecture issues now, small stuff. So I could say I'm going to implement this by putting the registers here on the local call stack. Or I could have the context and its arena of memory manage the stack. So it could say, I'm going to construct a new one, like a new set of registers, and push the old ones on a stack, and then I'll let you modify the most recent copy, and then when you want to restore, you'll just pop that one, right? So that would look like this. Or something like that. Okay, just running with that. Here's the really nasty one. What would this look like? If I did that, this would look like RPG regs equals RPG regs push context. Regs event used equals 1. Regs this entity sim entity kind character equals CHR tile equals tile RPG regs pop. I think I like it. I think we'll set up with that API. So in order to do that nicely, we're going to pull the registers out. That's these things. And then the big secret will be that there's also a sloppy little next pointer. Push pop, and then I probably want one that's just going to be a read, so I can read the registers sometimes without modifying them. Why don't we cross that bridge when we come to it? a hard call to make. Okay. Probably because we need to do RPG context regs push or regs push once right at the beginning just to get the ball rolling. No, that's not it. Okay. What is it? Ah. Even better. Okay. That was it, Tom. Everything's rewritten with the register system now. Operators. Yeah, I think this does look better. We could still make some pretty big improvements to these registers, though, so let's not call it over yet. Yeah, still trying to figure out that question. Okay, let's look at regs here. The event thing can get better now. So just like we did with IDs earlier, we're going to do it again. Meaning I'm now using a mix of both IDs and gathered arrays, which is cool. Okay, and then with that set up, I should be able to swap this out with an event. And that's going to come right away with a couple of pre-declared events. We want the tile header. This is used. The holder is damaged. And the holder rests. Event out. Oh, that's how that works, huh? RPG event, tile header. That should work. Oh, it doesn't work. Damn, that's cool. It looks like I defined those 4 events. RPG event enum. The same string matches all. Yeah, all 5 of those are the same. So what did I screw up here? Well, let's debug this, make sure all of this is set up. ID def. Enum tile header. That's not better, right? Because that's the same thing. Okay. Wait a minute. I see a problem. There it is. Athernus, the language is C, just plain old-fashioned C programming language. Okay, we want to eliminate these completely. I don't really have any opinions about programming languages in that way. I just know C. That's the thing. I mean, that's the main thing. holder damaged. And then there's event holder rests. Nice. Not sure if that's where I want them to live, but I'm not sure where to put them yet. Okay, so then with that idea in place, now we can actually roll this all the way back to this little snippet of code here, which is what inspired all the Magic ID stuff that went on for the last couple of days. And that was that I was thinking about how these new module idea, this new module idea that I was working on, I was thinking about how I was exactly going to deal with the aspect of the game that I wanted to have where I could have something like an attack tile that can only respond, the event could be more compound. So the event of using a tile is interesting within the structures of the game I have in mind, but I also want to be able to use the tile script code to see what can be used. And so you can imagine, like, if I've already scanned this and I've seen that this one can be used, and then I scan this one and I see it can't be used, then if I have an attack tile and a protected tile and I'm trying to decide what tile to use, or I'm trying to get the player to decide what tile to use, I want to make a list of the tiles they can use without using them all. So I want to be able to scan the tile basically and say, this one is got a handler for this event, this one's got a handler for this one event, this one doesn't. But this isn't entirely everything I needed to know, because the attack can only be used in a combat situation, or at least that's the way I'm phrasing it to myself right now. So what that meant was I wanted an additional piece of context bundled in with the same conditional here. The reason it had to be bundled in, the reason it can't be RPG encounter type context, RPG encounter combat, or whatever. The reason it can't just look like this is because one other or the other of these two would always come first. And I could set up a rule that says which one has to come first, but that's a bit clunky. If they can go either way, then there's no way to implement it so that it always does the right thing, because it has to still execute as C code, right? Basically, what I really want to do here is something more like, if I was going to fully drop it into like the absolute most flexible expression possible, it might need to look something like this: RPG tile clause begin, RPG tile conditional event context, right? Like I could spell this out. Encounter type encounter combat RPG tile clause body, or whatever, right? I could do this, but now just running the code, just scanning it is getting more and more complex. It's really compounding how heavy this runtime language is, so that this change of order is still technically legal. The boilerplate has blown up. It doesn't seem like the right trade-off. So instead, I am pushing towards, let's keep a single fixed set of like a data structure for describing the event that can fit into one function call. That's why it's event with context up there. And so the next move here is to take this and add it as an optional parameter here. So we have what's the event, here what's the output associated with this event, and then, oh, here's the module, and maybe you want to be able to do like, here's the event, here's the thing associated with the event, here's the encounter or the module you want to associate with, and here's the output for the module. That could be what happens. Now, one downside to having each of these things have their own separate ID system is that now this has to be typed. So the first event here, or the first code here always has to be the event. The second code always has to be the module. If I were to say something like, hey, let's make this a variadic, or like, let's build an array of, you could imagine having a struct and being like, oh, this is going to be your RPG event query or whatever. Oh, you do all your stuff. It takes a minute because it's C and it's a little bit funny. And you have like your event code and you have your data out. And then you make your array of them somehow. Right, you go like, I want this. And then I want this. Or heck, you know what? Maybe what you do is you go, here's your event structure. Right, and then you go, here's your data structure for that. You go like array count event. Right, you could do something like that maybe, and then you could go event data array count event, whatever. It's still fairly heavyweight, right? So that would take this much typing. And you'd probably also want to put each clause inside a square bracket, or inside its own brace now, which is already a fine option. But then, of course, that's not just for the compound case. That's what it would look like here too. So it's still pretty unfortunate. Let me keep fiddling with it. The other issue, though, actually, I didn't even look at one of the issues. The other issue I wanted to look at, though, is say you even got this far, there's still a problem of the typing. You don't know what ID each of these is from. If they're pointers, you don't know what type of pointer you got. So either of these all have to be in the same ID space somehow, so that each ID is unique, or you have to throw in type information. Like this could be a matter of being like, okay, this is an RPG event type event. I mean, oh, that's so. Maybe it's not an event as much as it's like context type, I don't know, RPG context type module, right? You could imagine typing each one with runtime information. Maybe these are IDs, and you can go like RPG context type event or, and flag them in, and they'll be the high bits module, right? There'll have to be like only up to like 3 or 4 or 5, no more. There couldn't be too many because we would only want to put a few bits to this. So you could have maybe up to like 8. That still leaves, well, I don't know if we actually need 32 bits. You could say maybe we're going to have more like 1,000 or 16,000 even if you wanted, probably without affecting. Yeah, and if you can do that, then you could make a bunch of separate ID systems for those and those and do it that way. Now, another very fine option, which I think is the one I'm going to go with for now, is the one I sketched up here, which is we keep the structure of just saying for now we're just querying out events like directly like this. It's just a one-off thing, and then We have a new special case, which is just a different kind of clause. If each of these is a clause of the tile, then this is like a different clause body or clause header or whatever, the fixed sized header portion of the whatever makes up the clause. And there are a couple of different kinds of headers, right? There's the tile header itself, which now I'm confusing my terminology, but there's that one, which is a little different from the event one, and then this is another event one that works just a little bit more differently, right? Which is like it throws in this thing. And so then, yeah, you want to get the combat module. You just get it directly after you've checked that you're in combat mode. But if you want it to be fancier about it, you could imagine doing it like this. Right? The event comes with data, the module comes with data. So if we're in combat, then we'll get the combat context through here. That seems like the way to do it. And so all we got to do to make that a reality Yep, so I'm answering this question now. It's not that it gets its own proto ID, it's just that it gets its own ID enum anyways. I might end up wanting to collapse all the ID spaces back down to a single ID space still. That's still totally a possibility. It would mean that I don't have all these separate data sections and that everything goes through a unique ID system. So it's not that unattractive still. Okay, now alright, this might be a good spot for me to take a 5-minute break, and when I get back, the next part of the challenge is to complete this check. I need to figure out how I'm going to check if a module is currently active. I currently have the concept that it's a list. Maybe that is correct. Maybe it should just look like the event where there's just one module. Because I have been also thinking about it as maybe it's just defining the current encounter. So it's the context which describes a situation that you are resolving as a player. Um, and in that way, it just provides the information about the context. Uh, and you can only be in one of them. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. The cool thing about it being flexible, that there might be more than one, is that you could then have multiple layers of game logic affecting you simultaneously, right? You could have the current encounter plus an ongoing quest that is driving time plus an overarching plot that is driving the whole game, right? And each one could be a separate module that is influencing what is possible and how things work within the tiles of your characters or whatever, right? So I don't want to rule that out, but I want time to think about that after a 5 or 10 minute break. So be back shortly. Let me set up a little sign. That should do it. Okay. Well, one way I can do this is I could say, okay, so there's a lot of possibilities opened to me here in terms of how I could replace this data structure with something to do essentially the same thing but faster. The big difference right now is that the name is now an integer, and those integers are allocated out of a set of IDs that are small and consecutive. So I could do all sorts of stuff. I could do bit fields, although then I would only be able to use the bit field to figure out if a module is currently active. That would be a very fast way to figure out if there is a module, but then if there is a module, I would still need some way to get to the pointer. If there are going to be like 20 of these, I could just make a dynamically allocated array of pointers right off the bat and put nulls in for modules that are currently not in play, and any module that is in play, you would just get your pointer off of it. When you learned that it was active, you would see a pointer there and take it. Like it would be a non-zero slot, right? Just that's how you would know. So the and then if I don't like that, if I end up deciding that there are going to be too many of those pointers or something, and I want to condense it, there's still so many options. I mean, a small consecutive set of IDs could be kept in a sorted order. You know, if they're going to be a very, like, it's up to 3 or 4 or 5 of them that are active, maintaining a sorted order with inserts and deletes and shifting would be fine. There's just so many options. I think for now the array option makes the most sense, because I only have one of these actually. And so if the module code is smaller than the module count, where's the module count though? We have rpg module enum dot count. I think that's what I mean. And the module data is the context module data module code. And then this gets transformed into this. We probably eliminate this. Maybe not. Maybe we still want that. but we'll get there in little steps. Matthias, that's a great question. The question is, am I making an RPG simulator for the purpose of min-max theory crafting in various games, or is it more as a tool for game design? I would definitely classify it in my head more as a tool for game design. Um, I don't really know how to elaborate on that, but that's definitely the way I've been thinking about it. Um, it certainly doesn't have. I certainly am not like looking at common or games or a particular branch of RPG and studying what I would need to simulate in order to min max that. It's much more from a creative perspective of like how can I make a thing that makes it very easy to program RPG like game mechanics, and what are the research aspect that I'm digging into it to deal with is what are the things I want to impress into the code, the structures like these new ID things I've got, this module thing I just set up. Which of these are the most useful? I kind of want to figure that out, and what I learn along the way will become the stuff I want to support in future iterations of programming tools and stuff. But it's also kind of it's exciting on its own, the sort of playing with the simulation and getting information back uh, from the space of simulated experiments and stuff. It's just fun. Okay, so everything still works. And the combat context is being queried through this API now. So I have to assume the module system is working. Okay, where are we going to next? Well, there is one thing I want to do. Over there in the operators function, yeah, this right here was just begging to be replaced with this. Okay, what's up next? I think I want to just keep pressing forward now with writing code. So I think there are some to do sitting around. There's this to do, I think might be the biggest one. But there's also stuff about like, the entity system is not actually good yet. So there's all that stuff. But right now, all the main pieces are in place and working better than they used to. And I have an urge coming up now to build out more of the simulation logic for the game part of it, right? Add more of the game script stuff. And right now, one thing happening that I never have changed is the protected tile is written, ready to do something, but these events are just never used in the simulation. So what I'm thinking I want to do, so I'm going to go into game combat here, and characters make their moves, apply hits. Here, we're decrementing hearts. I want to say from now on, okay, there's a couple ways I could do this, right? I could say that, right, the way I envisioned it here, what you do is the damage actually is connected to a combat hit. So a holder getting damaged actually means holders getting hit during combat. But I don't think that's actually what I had in mind. I mean, you're magically protected. So I think that anything that would attempt to decrease your hearts is prevented for each protected tile you have. So that would mean that it's more like this. And JD, I don't know if it's hard to learn or not. I don't know if it's hard to learn or not. The issue is I'm the one who developed it. I think it's great, and other people have added a lot of customizations to it. The people who do know if it's easy to learn or not are hanging out in the chat because a couple of, at least usually, um, uh, Terius Python might be here, or BYP might be here. I don't know. I don't know if they haven't said hello, but if he is, he might be someone who could tell you. I made it, so I don't think I'm the right person to tell you if it's easy to learn or not. But the people who work on it still probably have helped more people learn it recently than I have. Matthias asks, does this assume turn-based, or does it support cooldowns as well? So this simulation is currently turn-based, although I'm not sure I could say that it assumes turn-based. All the core really does is provide some basic mechanisms for sort of scripted logic so that you can put in game rules. But the ways in which you could program the game rules, I haven't even begun to push the boundary on what's possible. So there's these things that I call tiles, and they provide the space in which you code up what can happen. The way I'm building it, it's turn-based. So it might be that there are things you want in a turn-based game that it prevents you from turning it into real-time cooldown. or there might be things you need in real-time cooldown that are just going to be flat out missing that will, the assumption that I'm building a turn-based is kind of built in, but not on purpose, right? I'm not choosing to build it in. I'm just building a programming system, and I haven't pushed the boundaries on what it can and can't do. But I get the feeling it could do cooldowns. I get the feeling it could do real-time pretty easily. So, I don't know. It would basically come down to whether or not you wrote at the top level, right? It's all code right now. There's no way to use any of it. Uh, there's no way to use any of it without writing some controlling code at the top. So my combat loop is totally turn-based right now, and doesn't simulate time. But if you wanted to simulate time, I think that would just be a matter of adding in a time data structure. And the cool thing about simulating time is you don't have to do it with time. I don't know if that makes sense, but you can start to skip, like if you were playing a Final Fantasy style game with real time based move build ups and cooldowns or whatever. It's not like simulating that has to be a compression of the time that is equal. If there are moments, if a half of a second goes by where no character is going to complete what they're doing in the simulation, then you skip that whole half second because you just process the next moment when something unknown, that is something that is not yet computed, needs to be determined, right? And you don't even have to compute things in order if you build simulations of time. But a part of what I'm doing here is I'm trying to build it and script things in such a way that you could run the same code through a game engine, that it has a real-time interface, that you run through a simulation. And so that's an example of a problem that I don't have a cool solution for, but that I imagine you could do with a little bit of extra work, right? So is it real-time supported? The answer is not really in any substantial way, but I could totally see exploring it with the same basic techniques. It's not exactly like VS Code. No, you have to know how to set up your own build script. Like if you can make a makefile or a batch script or a bash script that builds your code, then it's only a few steps to set up a, like you need a four coder project in order to bind things like my build here. So this was F1. That's set up my four coder project. That's a couple of commands. And then you have to set up a build script yourself that runs the compiler for you, and connect that script to your F1 key or your build key, whatever you want that to be. And then it's click a button, run code, but you have to do that much setup. Okay, so I switched this part around. Now the question is, when does this event going to happen? And there's a couple ways I could think about it. One way I could think about it is I could say, okay, this particular tile is trying to, what it's really saying is whenever you would, let's see, apply hits, whenever you would decrement the hearts tile, run me first on the damage amount. That's what it wants to say. Now, how can that be done? There's a couple ways it could be done. It could be that this isn't saying when the holder is damaged. Maybe that's not an event. Maybe it's saying if RPG event tile deck context RPG, like holder tile deck, RPG tile heart damage amount, right? So it could be saying that there are events that are just event codes that happen, and we go for them. But then there are ones that are like more parameterized. It's saying whenever the holder of this tile would have its heart be decremented. So now I would be saying that there isn't an event for it, but rather that any tile ever getting decremented, we have to cross-reference all other tiles for this, right? Now, it wouldn't have to be a slow thing, because this is the kind of thing we could figure out pretty easily with some analysis after scanning all the tiles and seeing how they interconnect. If one of them is hooking a decrement on another type of tile, then all we're actually doing is saying something along the lines of create the data structure that lets us, whenever, keep track of which of our tiles are hooked for decrement or increment or whatever, and then it's kind of just like a live database programming optimization problem there. You gotta know when you have things that reference each other, and you keep track of it. It's annoying, but it's doable. The other way I can approach this is, and that's the cool thing about doing it that way, is once you start doing it that way, all tiles can be written to hook all other tiles all the time, right? So this would become just a thing we could do. Okay, if you try to decrease the number of heart tiles you have, then you can change the amount of that before it gets applied. But you could also imagine, something that's like going to say, if you would, well, I don't know. Off the top of my head, an example's not actually coming to me, but I can imagine it being useful to be able to hook all kinds of tiles directly that way. The downside is it does lead to that complicated data structure work that has to be done to fully optimize something like that, and it adds in a new kind of event that I have to check for that isn't an event code, leading to yet more complexity in the keeping track of the connections between things. The alternative is I could say, just use the old-fashioned event thing, and then we could go over here to the hearts, and we could say that the hearts themselves have some code in them, and that code is based on an event kind of like the this is used event, that it ties right into what happens to this tile. So if this tile is getting decremented, we can read its own amount, and we can say that's going to trigger an RPG event of holder damaged, right? So all of the effects of this are going to actually be effects of the protected tile and similar tiles that hook decremented hearts. And they hook decremented hearts through a separate event that we've coded in. So this would be like we're going to need to RPG get the regs, RPG push regs, regs push, RPG regs pop, and here we're saying we want to modify the event code to be RPG event holder damaged. So if this is getting decremented, this stack of tiles, that's the same thing as saying whoever holds this tile is getting damaged. And so now the holder damaged event is running, and it's going to run for RPG this character. All the tiles on this character need to undergo this. So, I think we're going to need something like event operators, function void RPG event recursive, RPG context, RPG sim entity, so we grab the registers in order to encode the event that we want to pass. And we have the character from this current context here that we want to pass this to. So then we call event recursive. That's going to okay, I gotta think this through a little bit. If I'm applying an event to a character, I think that I should be setting I already know in this case. Well, I don't. I don't know that. That's the thing. I was gonna say that I already know that this character has been selected, but I actually don't know that. Like, I just don't know when things get selected into the context. And it feels like the whole thing's a little bit off. The whole process of keeping track. So this has to be the character. Just in case, because you could be getting your heart decremented while some other party is doing something, right? So now we are handling this. Except we want to do something like this, which is another part that gets annoying, which is now we're pushing regs on regs sometimes. We're going to end up having to map out the whole thing just to figure out what's going on. Build something complicated, map it out, figure out why it's complicated, build it again. Every time. Now, if the child kind is an RPG sim entity tile, then tiles are programmed with hooks. So we can go if we have a tile, then look at the proto. It should have a hook. Specifically a tile hook. That we can call. And if that hook happens to be the script for a tile that does in fact include the event So it's sort of like this. It's just going to go call all the hooks. Whatever that happens to cause is what it will cause. But what it is going to cause is going to depend on what event you set up in the registers before you got that far. And if the hook happens to be this will return true and do some stuff if we're calling from right here, tile hook recursive. So And that's this sort of thing. Okay, so I've now kicked the can down the road to this event, but that's a regular old-fashioned event, not complicated. Hold on, let me do something. Okay. Now we want this decremented event to happen. Now let's see here in the operators. Tile dec. We have a tile decrementing moment right here. And there's an amount right there. That's what we want to do. We now want to go, okay, we've arrived at a tile. We're going to write RPG event on tile, context, this tile, the event is RPG event, this is decremented, and the data is the amount pointer. Actually, we're going to do local amount. Why don't we do, yeah, we'll do local amount. So we won't change the original amount. We'll give you that one. And then that won't go less than 0. But now this can modify the amount or make other changes before the decrement gets applied. And then if the decrement gets this down to 0, the logic happens either way, right? to do another time. Okay, so if everything is working, now when a character gets hit who has a protected tile, their HP should remain the same and they should lose a protected tile instead. So here, someone got a protected, and we took 3 hits from the party. Here, we should have taken 2 more hits, but I only see 1. And we should have gotten a protected tile, but I don't see one. So it looks like protected worked. That seems cool. So the situation here, the limitation that I'm adopting is that a tile can only be hooked on its increment or decrement if it agrees to do so. That might not be a limitation that I want to abide by forever. Now, this decremented looks like this. Event on tile. That should only, okay, so this used, no parameter, done. Yeah, it's fine. You just call the function. It's fine. I think I see another layer of simplification that's possible here. But I'm happy right now with what I got. So I think I'm going to go and try to build a little bit more game scripts while we got a little more energy in the tank to spend. So let's see. Another part of the game that's not being implemented correctly is that wizard is getting a chance to attack and a chance to use the protected spell. So we can see here, for instance, he must have protected this guy or this guy. One of them got protected and then got hit, and so the protected went away, but they only took 2 total damage. The enemy party had 6 health and now it has 2, so they did 4 damage. And that means that the wizard attacked and used the protect spell. And on top of that, every time that the wizard uses the protect spell, it should be not able to be used again. So the last part is pretty easy. That's just RPG tile deck. Local amount. Oh, hold on. So this one. Yeah, that one's different. adjusted amount should be on this one. New counter. Final amount equals clamp top. Local amount tile counter. So the idea here is first let's clamped amount. First let's not pass the whatever amount it is. Let's enforce the boundaries on these counters, which is that they don't go below 0, they don't go above their max if they have a max. And RPG event, this decremented local amount. Okay, right. And then the rest of that is just paranoia. That goes away. And that's all fine. And then a separate discard rule has to get applied. Okay, so the max amount, the clamped amount is the max of amount and the max, oh no, it's the clamp top of amount and max amount. The local amount is the clamped amount passed into this incremented on the tile. Clamp again and set counter. Okay. So now we can see that protect does get used up. And on the second round, they do take 2 damage instead of 1 when they're up against 2 enemies. So let's see here. They're up against 3 enemies. They take 3 damage and one of them is protected. They take 2 more damage and 2 of them are protected. How is that possible? Well, it must be that even though we've counted the protected down one, it still thinks it's usable. And this is where we want to add a rule that any tile with a counter set to 0 becomes inert, meaning all of its effects stop applying. Or at least, yeah, that's tough. Because the other way I would do this is I would say when the holder rests, this tile increments by 1. But then that means this still applies even if the tile has a counter of 0, but this does not still apply. So I got to decide how I want to think about that. One way it could be done is just this. Right? We could say this tile has to have a counter greater than 0 before it can do anything. It's hard-coded in. The problem with that is that then it still looks like it is available for use up until that moment. So the system that decides, can I use this or not, would still look at it and say yes. It's just it would do nothing. But we actually want the information that you can't use this to be visible outside of the code, not just baked into the behavior, but actually exported out so that the system which is analyzing what are all the valid moves won't include this as a valid move. Interestingly, the same sort of problem came up with attack for a different reason, and we changed the event to support another. We switched to supporting an additional event in that case to make it work. Because we wanted it to know we wanted it to know how the conditional worked. We wanted to submit the whole conditional, not just pieces of it at a time, but one unit of conditional with the whole thing bundled. So this would be like I think the most straightforward way is to say event passive. So if it says passive here, then it means this works even if the tile is inert. Whereas these events only work if the tile isn't inert. Now this one's also special because it can never be at 0. So this won't even go to inert. It'll get discarded. And so this means nothing for the distinction between these two. There, it's all equivalent because it's never at 0 when it exists. This one does not get discarded at 0, so this matters. Unless I build into the this used event the concept of this check, right? I could say used is special, and that it's not about how you encode the event on the tile. It's about which event it is. Because then oh, jeez. There it is. Okay, so what I was saying is if I go with this idea that this used event is special, then what happens? Right. So the tile has to have its counter greater than 0 for it to be usable. That's one of the things. That seems easy enough. So we see here that the party is still doing 4 damage. And the wizard is also using its protected spell. So we can know that he's still using 2 moves. So that's the last thing we have to be able to change. When we go to say we want to use a tile, the character actually needs to have unused moves. Thanks, Ronan. So how do we want to track character moves? Right? One option, so we go over here to the sim entity and call it a counter. But I actually want to be able to, I want to be able to add in multiple kinds of moves. Like I want like a quick action and then an action, and you get one of each, or some sort of structure like that. And so you can have 2 moves that just have different categories, and the quick actions tend to be not something that you use to do damage, but something else that makes a small difference to the structure of the situation of the simulation, whereas the actions do the main forward progress on the RPG move stuff. At least that was how the prototype was working, the first pass version. And so in order to use a tile, if I was going to do it the whole way I did it before, is you'd have to be able to go move kind equals proto move kind if RPG character move count character move kind is greater than 0, then RPG character move decrement character move kind now 1. Now one way that could be done is those could be tiles. You know what I mean? Like we could just do RPG tile def on a couple of built-in things like quick action and action. And then instead of having move kinds here, we'll just have a U32 we'll go okay, so it would look like that. Except protos don't have a move kind. This would be tile.moveKind. It would go right here. Although I guess it would be a proto. And then to fill those out, we got to go look at the spot where we're initializing tiles somewhere around here. Yeah, and then the proto tile move kind has to come out of the regs. Tile move kind. At some point, probably the registers should not contain this tile construction flim-flam, but that's how it works for now. The function keyword, I mean, it's just define static, basically. It's like this. So if you know C, that's what it means. If you don't know what static means, I can explain further. Yeah, I used to rely on it a lot more. Now it's not that big a deal. It's just my habit of what I type when I'm laying things out. I don't ship like libraries that way or stuff, anything like that. That's just for my convenience and the code that I write that's not meant to go out into the world. Okay, so everything still behaves like it did before. We can see we only took 2 damage, so he used his protected spell. And they dealt 3 damage, so we don't have, well, we don't have proof. We have to have proof that they dealt 4, so there's 4 damage and protected. So he did 2 moves in 1 turn still. And that's because even though we set up the limiting factor on moves, we did not set up anything to actually grant moves or anything to restrict the moves. So an attack is the kind of thing which now goes tile header, move kind, and then it's going to be RPG tile action. And the same thing is going to happen with protect. It's going to be move kind action. Now protected is not a move, and the heart is not a move. So those don't have a move kind at all, which is fine. So that looks bad. But I think that that's what we should expect to see. Why isn't it showing forecoder with the simulator underneath it? There we go. I think that's what we should expect because I didn't give anybody any moves. So now these tiles have a max tile header, fixed max of 99. Grant moves. So we're going to go for each party, for each character, Then I give it the context, the character. The RPG tile action 1 and the quick action 1. Now that operator set Why does this get the max this way? I want to go and understand that before I go any further. Does that make sense? Tile ink, how does that work? That just goes off of the max it's sitting on the tile. Now if I get a new tile from nowhere, I set the max based on what's in the proto, and then if it's empty, I set it based on the amount. But that's only for init. After init, the max is based on that initial amount. So this should definitely be tile max equals proto tile max. And then we increment by the amount. Tile script, tile script. So at the beginning of combat, we just say each character gets one action and one quick action. And now, so I kind of want to be able to say hide that tile when it's on a character. But let's ignore the quick actions and the actions for now and look at... Okay, it looks like they're dealing 4 damage and he's never using the protect spell. So attack is going first, but he's only using 1 move. If, well, let's do this hide thing real quick. Okay, so these want to get marked as hidden. These are hidden tiles. We still see them because we don't know about hidden tiles in the logging. Oh, yes we do. If not, tile proto hidden. It's that simple. Tile dot. Right, and then the deal is hearts and attacks have always just been hidden tiles lurking in plain sight. Nice. Okay, cool. Okay. Okay. Okay, okay. So, let's see if we can do anything now. I suppose we could go and play with... I mean, the immediate thought in my head is to work on the order between attack and protect. So what's happening there is they're both added to an entity, a character entity called the wizard. The wizard gets its one attack tile from this notation and its one protect tile from this notation, and presumably it gets them in that order. I think we'll see this here when we look at the from literal logic. This is where a literal comes in. Literals are what we get when we parse one of these little character scripts or one of these other types of scripts. And so we get one of these literal things, and then we're converting the literal into a proto for that character. So the hearts get added, the attack gets added, and then everything else gets added. So if I did this, we would see the wizard start to behave the other way around. So they dealt 3 damage this time and used 1 protected spell. They took 3 damage. Then they took 2 damage and lost that protected status and did another 3 damage, right? Okay. So that's the rules of the game actually being applied the way it's supposed to. The wizard now does his special ability before he does his basic attack. That means if I start adding in other special abilities, they'll all start behaving the way they should. And so I could start now moving towards the next layer, the next echelon of complexity, which I had in the old demo, the old RPG simulator, which is the ability to run a bunch of these and analyze and visualize the distribution of the results for each simulation. That could be a good last step. Let me see here. I think this is a good spot to wrap up for today, because I'm almost at 3 hours on this stream. It's a good amount of streaming. It's a little bit past the normal end of work time for me. So I think now's a good time to wrap up here. I have no idea what I'll do with my last day tomorrow. I could just implement a bunch more of the game logic. I feel like that's the kind of thing that's fun to do on a final day. And or I could start building that statistical analysis layer on top of all this. Maybe I want a little bit of both, because it's fun when you write the code and you get it working to then go and see its effect in the simulation. But I'm going to wrap up here. Just I want to give you all a little bit of an idea of how this is looking in terms of the progress on this rewrite. So before, in my previous iteration, none of these were tiles. Quick action, heart, and attack didn't work as tiles at all. So the part of what has happened is I've managed to push things that used to be just built-in logic. These were attached to the entity as integers. So were these. These were just counters living on the main character entity. And then things like protect and protected were tiles that looked roughly like what they look like now. This part hasn't changed as much, although now the events aren't like a list of hard-coded functions growing out of control. There's this event ID system, which is feeling better. The fact that I can program this stuff out of tiles now feels better, because the entity now doesn't contain just a mishmash of random stuff built into my particular RPG. They're starting to work more just like scripting variables, except that they're variables that aren't just counters. They have the special magical property that they also hook on to different events. And then when you put a combination of these counters together, the way the thing behaves depends on what the code in each of those hooks looks like, in addition to what the counters themselves look like. And so then we can start doing things like what the protect and protected tile are doing, which is this much code to represent one ability in the game, and plug into things like how it this is the cooldown logic for the game. The game says you use this, and then whenever a rest event happens, which we haven't built yet, but we would do that tomorrow if we built out the next level of the simulation. When the rest event happens, then this would recharge itself And we could set up to see that in the log as well. So I don't know. Point is, I think that this has gone super well so far. The new system works really well. And with that, I think I will wrap up for the day. So thanks for coming and hanging out today or at any point if you have. And I'll see y'all around the internet. Bye.